I'm with Gidon Ariel from Root Source. Now, Gidon, what is Root Source?
Root Source is a website, but mostly it's an organization, and I would say even a movement of Christians and Jews reaching out to be friends with each other. And primarily, the organization runs a program of authentic Jews, Orthodox Jews from Israel, teaching Christians who want to learn from those Jews who want to teach them.
When we started and why we started?
We started Root Source about 7 or 8 years ago. And that we is me. I'm Gidon Ariel, an Orthodox Israeli Jew. I was born in New York, but I moved to Israel during high school. And my friend and colleague and partner, Bob Odell. Bob Odell is an evangelical Christian, born and still living in Austin, Texas. Actually, I think he was born in Florida, but, America. And we met on the walls of Jerusalem near the Jaffa Gate about 7 or 8 years ago, where I shared with the group that Bob was a member of my vision of teaching Christians over the internet the Jewish sources that are the roots of their Christian faith. And the group, when they heard that, they said, wow. And Bob approached me afterwards and said, I want to be your first student, and I'd love to be your partner as well. And it's been a wild ride ever since then.
Was there a need for Christians to understand more about the Jewish life and culture?
Was there a need for Christians to understand more about Jewish life and culture? I think definitely so. I think that there's a billion Christians today. Everybody's running their own, doing their own thing. And they seem to be pretty happy. But I really think that if they want to have a great relationship with Jesus, which is the way that I see most evangelical Christians, that's their main point in life, then they have to understand him better. If I want to have a relationship with my girlfriend, for example, or let's say a woman wants to have a relationship with somebody who's a real Arsenal fan, is that the right kind of a real football fan, but she knows nothing about football, or actually she thinks, oh yeah, football, I know, that's the game that you have this long piece of wood that you hit balls with, right? Like she's completely clueless about what football is. So how much of a relationship could she have with her boyfriend who loves football? She's got to learn a little bit something about it, and she might even really love it. So if she doesn't love it, okay, so maybe this isn't the right guy for you. But if you really love Jesus, if I can come out of that metaphor, then you want to learn about him. And Jesus was an Orthodox Jew living in a Jewish community in the land of Israel 2,000 years ago, studying God's Torah. That is who Jesus was. He was other things also, but in his lifetime, that's who he was. And so if you really want to understand him, then you should try to find a way to learn that same Torah from the same kind of teachers that Jesus learned from. And then you will be on the same page as Jesus.
Do you think this is something that is lacking in the church today?
I've visited, when you say the church, I don't think you mean the brick and mortar churches, especially now during COVID, the Zoom churches. But I think it is definitely lacking because I'm the first and one of the few organizations of authentic Jews teaching Christians on a basis of respect and love these things. And there are I have very few students. I only have a few thousand students. So if I have only a few thousand and there's a billion, then yes, I guess it's lacking. But hopefully there are going to be more Jewish organizations and Jewish individuals that are going to get this and are going to realize that this is a mandate that we Jews have to do. And hopefully there will be many, many more opportunities for these Christians to find us and to establish those relationships with us and to study God's Torah from us. Now, it's something very special because up until now, most Jews didn't imagine that we could even religiously engage at all with Christians. And then to teach the Torah to Christians, it just doesn't compute. And many Christians didn't have that in their experience and their traditions either. But little by little, it's happening, and you know the way it works. Little by little, more and more, snowball effect, and God only knows when it'll reach a critical mass, and it'll be the thing that everybody does.
Do Christians connect with you from all around the world?
Of course, this is the age of the internet, And as a matter of fact, that's the reason why I had to change my model. My initial plan was that I would have live one-on-ones. No, one-on-ones is not, no, I would have live classes. And I would have 10, 20, 30 people or something like that in a class. But when I saw that I had people who were very interested in from the Philippines and from England and from New York and from California and from Hawaii, basically every single time zone on Earth. So I had no choice but to record these lessons. And so that changed. But thank God we have over 1,000 lessons. And it's not just me. I have about a dozen faculty members, about 1,000 lessons recorded. And like I said, tens of thousands of people have heard some of Root Source's wisdom.
What sorts of teachings do you teach, and who do you have teaching?
Right now, we have about a dozen teachers, as I said. Most of them are Orthodox rabbis. We have 2 or 3 women teachers as well. We have, let's say, put it this way, I don't ask to see these rabbis' ordination certificates, so I don't know who's really a rabbi, who's not, but it really doesn't matter. Personally, myself, I'm not an ordained rabbi. But rabbi also means teacher. And so anybody who is teaching things that somebody is interested in learning, that's good enough for me. What we already have, some of the courses that are being taught are Women in the Bible, the weekly portion, the Jewish image of God, Jewish history, in introductory Hebrew, the land of Israel, the temple. These are some of the topics that some of my teachers, I tell my teachers, teach what you're interested in teaching. And we'll find somebody who's interested in hearing it from you. My vision is that Root Source will be the YouTube of Jews who want to teach Christians, who want to watch those videos that they are teaching them.
And is there a growing hunger amongst Christians to understand the Jewish faith?
From what the many of the Christians who reach out to me, who respond to me, I mean, I've got, like I said, thousands of people who are on our newsletter. I don't know, handfuls, hundreds of them, not more than that, respond and reach out to me. And a handful say, oh, Gidon, tell me the answer to this, and I have a question for you. And we've become very good friends. But frequently people say when they first find out about Root and subscribe to our newsletter, they reach out to me and say, wow, this is exactly what I've been looking for years. And I really believe that God is putting it into their hearts. Now, it's not just out of nowhere that God is putting into his hearts. Israel is in the news. I do believe that, I remember seeing that the man of the year or the phenomenon of the decade or something like that on Life magazine or Time magazine a couple of decades ago was the Jewishness of Jesus. Now, I'm sure that a majority of Christians today still say, if they are asked, was Jesus a Jew or a Christian, they would laugh and say, what kind of a silly question is that? Was he a Buddhist? Was he a Muslim? Of course he was a Christian. But more and more people are realizing that, no, of course he wasn't a Christian. He was a Jew. Jesus, was the reason for Christianity to be established. And you can start talking about anachronisms of how he was foreshadowed in the Old Testament. But the fact is, the man who walked the streets, the man who walked this earth almost 2,000 years ago, who, if he was in first grade, he went to a yeshiva. He was in first grade with a bunch of other Jews. He had a bar mitzvah. He observed Sabbath. He observed Hanukkah. All of these things are written in the New Testament. It's impossible to think anything else. And I think that Christians who study the Bible put 2 and 2 together, put 1 and 1 together, the First Testament and the Second Testament, and say, Jesus was a Jew. I want to learn more about him. I want to learn more about that. And then hopefully they find Root Source.
Are Jews beginning to wake up to an understanding and relationship with Christians?
Relatively, in other words, percentage-wise, perhaps faster than Christians. In other words, if there's 1 billion Christians and let's say 1,000 Christians a day find out about this, then the one Jew a day that finds out about this maybe is more than those 1,000 Christians. I'm not sure. But it's a much, much slower thing, because today you can have a Christian who is unfamiliar with the Jewish Christian history, which means that they don't know how terrible that history was. But there are very few Jews, especially strongly identified Jews, who aren't familiar with that history. And so it's a lot harder for a Jew to say, you know what? I'm going to cross that Rubicon and I'm going to reach out and engage with that Christian or any Christian. I mean, think about it. We're meeting now in Hebron, and I live not far from here in a small Jewish community. Most of the people in my community are scared of Arabs, are scared of Muslims. They're afraid that person might be a terrorist and might want to kill me. And so they have zero Muslim friends, even though there are hundreds of thousands of Muslims who live within a half-hour radius of them. But once they think, wow, that Muslim is a child of God. He's established in God's image. Maybe there's somebody who I have something in common with and I can talk about. I don't only have to talk about how you killed my friend's mother. And pardon the comparison, but Christians for Jews, for most strongly identified Jews, it's the same thing, because they remember the horrible history of Jews and Christians, and so that's why it's a lot harder for Jews to do. But like I said, I see that as my mandate to reach out to Jews. It's going to be a lot harder. It's not going to be as easy as just throwing up a website, but to reach out to Jews and tell them, make a tentative step, make a friend of a Christian based on mutual respect, and then you will find that it will ultimately be based on mutual love.
Now, you've been connecting with Christians for many years. Did you receive opposition in the early days of doing this?
From whom?
From the Jewish side?
Well, I'm also a little bit of a politician, so I know that you say things that you want to be heard and you don't say things that you don't necessarily want to be heard. So it was very, very slow for me to reveal my activities to my friends. Even my wife at first said, Gidon, what are you doing? Look, you grew up in New York. Even the Christians in New York were Jewish. I grew up in Kansas. I know what Christians are. And let me tell you, Gidon, you're wrong. The Christians, they're all A, B, C. Little by little, she realized, you know what? There are Christians. I've met some of your friends, Gidon, and they've become my true friends. And you realize that people are individuals. And just because there's a so-called general rule, some sort of prejudice, well, try to break down those prejudices. And I'm not asking people to befriend Christians. I'm asking them to consider befriending individuals who happen to be Christians. And then try to be good friends with them and learn who they are. And maybe you'll say, wow, this is very interesting. And then you'll realize that even God wants you to do that.
Are you excited at what God is doing?
Does it sound like I am? Very excited. Look, I've been excited about what God is doing ever since I was a bar mitzvah, even earlier. I discovered that God is doing something in this world. He is bringing the Jewish people back to the land of Israel as he promised in the Bible. The Jewish people came up like a phoenix from the Holocaust. We were this close to being totally eradicated, and a mere 3 or 4 or 5 years later, we established a state that a mere 70 years later became one of the strongest states in the world. God is bringing these Jews back from 70 nations. Could you imagine? It's hard enough when I come home from school. It's hard enough for me to talk with my little sister. But can you imagine these people coming from all these different places, and we're establishing a state together? We're actually learning how to live together. That's a miracle in itself. So God is doing all of these things and more. And I really am excited that what I think is the last chapter in God's end times books. Other people have different last chapters. But I think that the last chapter in God's end time book is that the entire world will come to know him. Not just the Jewish people. Again, the Jewish people are understandably a very Judaism and Jewishness-centric people. But they have to understand that God wrote in the Bible, all the people of the world will come to recognize me, to recognize God. And it is the Jewish people's responsibility and mandate to search out those people and to be the teachers of the world about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And God has put me, or even though I'm certainly not deserving, in a place, and I'm sure that within a mere few years, everybody will forget Gidon Ariel because there'll be such just more gigantic teachers doing this. But he put me in a place amongst one of the early adapters to this, and that's tremendously exciting. Imagine the person that's walking around and said, nobody ever remembers him, but he said, I invented email. You're going to be excited till the end of your days that you were there when it began. Okay, you didn't really know what you're doing, and today it isn't even close to what you thought of, but it was your idea. And so God put this idea into me, and I'm very, very excited. And meanwhile, I'm focusing on it.
What's your prayer for the future?
My prayer for the future is that God will bring about his wonderful end time scenarios with as little of the negative ones as possible. And right now I'm seeing that that's really happening. So I'm praying that more and more Christians will find out how important it is for them to engage with Jews on a basis of mutual respect, and especially how more Jews will recognize that they don't have to be afraid of Christians, they don't have to hate Christians, they don't have to only think about the history. We can't forget our history, but we have to build upon it. And if something negative happened, listen, the first time that I met my wife, it wasn't such a positive thing, but we came back together, and we are based upon also those negative things. And all the times that I fought with my sister when I was a kid, well, today we have a very loving relationship that wouldn't have been that relationship had it not been for those bad things. So I pray that the Jews will recognize that in spite of and together with, based upon, built upon those negative histories, we will build a much more positive, a divine future history between Jews and Christians and the entire world.
And what's your website for people who'd like to know more?
Oh, yes. That's root-source.com. Root Source. Nowadays, I always recommend people don't look for the website. Look for it on Google and find the website through Google. He's smarter than we are. That's www.root-source, like a minus sign, root-source. That's root as in tree and source as in water, root-source.com. Looking forward to seeing you there. Please send me a message there on Contact Us.
Okay, Gidon, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.